Hello my wonderful, beautiful friends, guys. Welcome back to our /MaliciousCompliance, where people get exactly what they ask for and the stories are super satisfying. And in today's episode, guys, landlords are getting destroyed left and right. So if you've ever dealt with a horrible landlord before, these stories will for sure make you smile. I hope you enjoy the tales today, and as always, you can send or link your Reddit post to this email right here. I'm a 27-year-old male, and I live with my boyfriend, a 28-year-old male. The house in question was our first place together, and we'd been there for 5 years. It was the only place we could afford, and it wasn't the most aesthetic when we moved in. It's shaped like a shipping container, and not much bigger than one. Plus, it's surrounded on 3 sides by 2-plus-story homes, and on the remaining side, there's a parking lot for all said homes, which opens onto a major road. In the backyard, there was a tiny shed, which fits a washer and dryer and was otherwise a thin strip of dirt the length of the home, boxed in by the shed and the privacy fences of the other homes. The yard itself was not fenced in. We had to use the front door to walk around the home and then through the parking lot to access the laundry shed in the yard, as there was no back door. Now, the original landlord was very receptive to us making improvements to the house, so we painted, refinished the cabinets, tiled the bathroom, etc. In the backyard, I built raised garden beds, installed a small pond and a bird fountain, as well as other landscaping, so it became a bit of an unexpected oasis. We also had an outdoor table and chairs, so we could sit out there in the morning and share a cup of tea. Now, as you may have put together, the original landlord sold the home, and our lease transferred to the new owner. We had plans in the works to purchase our first home together, so we only intended to stay to the end of the lease anyway, and figured it shouldn't affect us too much. Almost immediately, the new landlord begins to harass us daily, often about issues entirely out of our control, such as cars being parked in the lot sideways. Cars which were first of all our neighbors' cars, and they were merely slightly crooked, certainly not sideways. The guy even showed up at our front door at 8:30 p.m. on a Friday when we had 2 friends over to play board games and have dinner, and the guy had the nerve to ask, "Are you gonna wind up the party anytime soon, boys? Because people are gonna get the wrong idea, you know?" We did our best to appease the landlord for the remaining months, but it became extremely grating and honestly made me feel like I was being watched constantly. The final straw was when a technician came to fix the washing machine in the shed, and the landlord noticed the tables and chairs in the backyard. We then received an email that evening telling us, in all caps, to remove all modifications of the yard. No patio furniture is permitted. Mind you, this isn't even visible from the road, but whatever. So I responded, just to be sure, apologies for the mistake. To confirm, you would like us to remove all modifications that we've personally made to the yard since our move-in date of so-and-so? The answer was yes, remove immediately at the soonest convenience. And I'm thinking, you got it, Chief. We were just about in our final month of the lease, and we were preparing to move to our new home. I had planned to leave the raised beds, plants, and an empty pond behind. But since he said that, I decided that I was gonna revert the place to a dirt strip out of spite. So that's what I did. I collected my bird fountain, my pump, my fish, the flower bulbs, and the other plants. I even took the dirt I purchased for the raised beds to our new home. We then filled in the pond and we made sure to remove all the grass, so it was one sad strip of dirt again. The landlord was extremely angry to find the yard in that state, and he was threatening to sue us for destruction of property because we ruined his pond. The guy then tried to keep our security deposit, and he did take us to small claims court over the damage. However, we were diligent when we moved in, and we had photos of the original yard, plus the email instructing us to remove all modifications of the yard. He then tried to say that we did other damage to the home, all of which was regular wear and tear after 5 years of occupancy, which any landlord should expect. Not to mention, we could prove that we left the place nicer than it was originally. I'm sure the judge saw through him immediately, as the guy was quite rude and he continued to interrupt her, to which she reprimanded him several times. We got our security deposit back in full, even after having trashed the yard. Guys, all I can say is good work, OP, and way to go for grabbing those before pictures, because otherwise I can't see that holding up well in court. But guys, what a crazy controlling landlord, right? And listen, I don't want to reach and make assumptions, but it seems to me the landlord was harassing them because he had a male couple living on the property. Like, what a weirdo though, not letting them sit outside and telling them to not have gatherings with other friends because it might give off the wrong impression to others. I only wish OP reverted the inside back to its original crappy state too. That would have been something. This happened in 2018. I just moved to a new apartment. It was a 3-bedroom, first-floor apartment with a finished basement. It had 2 bedrooms, a living room, and a kitchen on the first floor. It also had a bedroom in the basement and a bar/gaming area. It was also in a very nice area of the city. The apartment was owned by a corporation. Honestly, we loved that apartment until it kept having recurring issues in the basement. The carpet was wet from time to time, and at first, the landlord would send a cleaner to come handle it, but it keeps happening. I asked them to come check and fix the issue, and they didn't do it. That's when I told him that I'll call the city inspector to check the building, and they laughed at me going, "Go ahead, call the city inspector." So I did. I called the city twice until finally I was connected to the right department, and they sent an inspector a week later. The inspector found so many building violations. They told me that they'd contact the building owner and they would come again. The next day, the owner calls and begs me to tell him what I know about the problem with the apartment. I told him I sent complaints multiple times and they should check their records. So the city inspector, the owner, and the property manager came 2 weeks after that. The city inspector was whooping their asses. He laid it to them. It was so bad. They have to deal with structural and foundational issues and some safety issues too. There were 4 tenants in that building, including us. Imagine, it was a big colonial multi-family home divided into 4 apartments, and they had to break the lease with all of us to fix the building. They couldn't fix it with us being there. We were ready, and we already consulted a lawyer, and we told the owner that 1, we want our deposit back before moving out, 2, they paid us for all our moving expenses, and 3, they paid for our deposit at the next place. At this point, they couldn't kick us out, and they couldn't rent the apartment after the inspections. There were 4 of us, and we could all sue them for placing us in a dangerous building. In the end, they spent so much money to relocate us and fix the apartment. Guys, this is exactly why you need to be careful what you dare people to do, because some people might actually do it. And in cases like this, where you're living in a place that constantly floods and you're dealing with nasty wet carpet and the landlord's not doing anything about it, it's time to take matters into your own hands. Like, it's absolutely disgusting how some landlords don't give a damn about their tenants, and for sure they knew OP and the others were living in unsafe conditions. So OP does come back to clarify some stuff, and he says, number 1, the other tenants received money and compensation from the landlord too. They also got their moving costs covered as well. I did not make them homeless, and some of them even thanked me. Number 2, we moved to a new neighborhood that was only a 5-minute walk to my office, and it was a single-family house. We loved that neighborhood, and we stayed there a year until we bought our house. The rent was actually cheaper. Number 3, the building was owned by a corporation, so when I say landlord, it refers to the owner plus the property manager. I hope they learned their lesson. A few years ago, I moved back to the city in which I was a university student. As I was now a young professional and had experienced significant issues with housemates in the past, I decided that I would rent a small flat from an agency that specifically catered for young professionals such as myself. I went and viewed the property, which was quite messy, and needed to have a few things addressed. The vinyl flooring in the kitchen was ripped, and one of the drawers in the freezer was broken. But seeing as tenants were still living in the property, the agency assured me that between tenants, the landlord would clean the property and resolve any small issues prior to moving in. At that, I happily signed a contract, and I wrote checks for deposit and the first months of rent. 2 months later, I moved into the property, and I was welcomed with the following issues. Now, I do want to note that I happened to stumble upon the list I made at the time when clearing out an old hard drive a few days ago. So in general, the entire property had not been cleaned. The fire door would not close, the previous tenants had left much of their belongings behind, namely clothes and bedding, general waste was present in all the rooms, batteries had been removed from the fire and smoke alarms, and half the light bulbs had been removed from the property. In the hallway, the main supply and circuit breaker was ripped from the wall, which is incredibly dangerous, and the carpet was soiled. In the bedroom, the slats on the bed were broken, the mattress was torn and ripped, the vinyl floor was ripped up, and the window jamb was closed. In the bathroom, I found fecal matter on the light switch, mirrors were broken, the toilet had not been cleaned and still had fecal stains in the bowl, the shower door was broken off the hinges, and the vinyl floor was torn up. In the kitchen and living room, the washing machine was broken, all shelves in the fridge were absent or broken beyond repair, the gas cooker was missing burner caps and the pan rail, therefore unusable, 2 cabinet doors were hanging off, vinyl floor was ripped up, and the curtain pole was ripped down. Now, it was very clear that 2 things occurred here. The first being that the previous tenants had done a bit of a number on the property. They had not respected the property and they left quite a lot of damage in their wake. They didn't even have the decency to empty the place of their contents, and at a bare minimum, take the garbage out before leaving. The second issue, however, is the landlord had evidently not made any significant attempt to bring the property back into a livable condition prior to me moving in. So being the reasonable guy I was, I called the landlord and asked if he could resolve the issues immediately, because the property was genuinely in a dangerous, non-inhabitable state. Now, I didn't want to be a dick about it, however, but at the bare minimum, the flat should have been safe to inhabit. The landlord dismissed all of my complaints and stated that his wife had inspected and cleaned the property a few days before, and all was fine. I told him I was extremely unhappy with the situation, and he told me to adhere to the contract, which I signed. He then subsequently put the phone down, and any sympathy I had for the guy evaporated at this moment. He was happy for me to live in a dangerous and disgusting property. So I went through my contract line by line, and I found 2 key pieces of information. Number 1, if a property is deemed to be in breach of fire regulations or is deemed uninhabitable by a suitable representative, it's the responsibility of the landlord to resolve such issues immediately. Number 2, if the landlord can't resolve such issues immediately, it's the responsibility of the landlord to provide alternative accommodations to the tenant until the property is returned to a habitable state. Fortunately, a close member of my family at the time was a fellow of the Royal Institute of Chartered Surveyors. Within the hour, I had a formal letter stating that the property was uninhabitable and it was dangerous. I then emailed this to the landlord, and within 10 minutes, I had a call from him arranging emergency accommodation at a local hotel, until he returned from his business trip 3 days later. On his return, he drove directly to the property from the airport, and he returned the checks for my deposit and my first month's rent to me. And then he asked me to move out, which I gladly did. Now, unbeknownst to him, a copy of the letter had been sent by my family member to the housing ombudsman and the local authority. The last thing I heard is that the guy ended up being investigated, heavily fined, and then he had to sell the house. Guys, this was absolutely glorious. And I just want to say that that agency that specifically catered to young professionals really dropped the ball by hooking up OP with this guy. About 20 years ago, I was dating the man that I would later marry. He had an apartment that was a quad, but wasn't surrounded by the best neighbors. It was sold, but he was kept on as a tenant by the new landlord. Now, the guy wasn't a bad landlord per se, but he fancied himself a handyman, and the guy was cheap. So the washer and dryer that was included in the rental both break, and the landlord comes in to fix my boyfriend's setup. It works, but only temporarily, and they keep breaking over and over again. It goes on for months. Boyfriend, who's a model tenant, finally complains lightly, saying that he's been going over to his mom's to do laundry, but sometimes he has to do it late, so he's been having to spend money at the laundromat. The landlord says that my boyfriend can bill him for the laundry, and the landlord will reimburse if things break down again, and to make sure it's all documented by time, date, and amount. The landlord then says that he's gonna take a look at it right now. The guy was confident somehow in the skills that he hasn't shown. And they broke again. Now, I'm far less tolerant about these things, but my significant other doesn't like to be trouble to anyone. Still, he's really tired of not being able to do laundry at home, but thought it was really good of the landlord to offer to pay for his quarters at the laundromat. Bless his heart, and cue my malicious compliance. The problem's gone on for 6 months, and I'm going to be solving it. I tell my boyfriend that he'll have to keep track of the quarters he spends by date, time, and amount. And since there's no receipt, they might have to fight it out over the amount. And I just know he hates conflict. Plus, there's the time and gas he spends, which, while he could bill for it, any lawyer would argue that he would have spent time awaiting his laundry anyway at home. I tell him to send his laundry out for service because a service provides receipts. He then asked me, but won't that be expensive? At that, I grin and say, it might be, but that's the only way to provide adequate documentation he's asking for. You can't prove what you spent at a laundromat, but you can with a laundry service. You'll include a copy of the bills with your rent and a note saying that you've subtracted the amount that it costs to do your laundry this month, as a washer and dryer has been included in the rental agreement and has not been working consistently properly for 6 months. Since there's no documentation for the last 6 months, of course, we won't be retroactively billing them. Don't worry, sweetheart, I'll write the note, and I'll be sure to thank him for providing this in lieu of getting it fixed. It's really nice of him. My boyfriend says, okay, that sounds good, but how do you even arrange for that? I know dry cleaning, but this is laundry. I then say, I'll take care of the details, no problem. They charge by pound and load, so I make sure to include all the stuff that he had put off washing since it wasn't a top priority. He had only been doing the essentials for fear that one or the other would break mid-cycle, and because he felt he was taking advantage of his mother. And boy howdy, it was really expensive having a laundry service do his laundry. I arranged for regular pickup and drop-off that was convenient for my significant other. They even folded his underwear. The rent check he handed over was substantially lighter by more than $200, but all receipt copies did have the time, date, and the amount. The landlord scheduled an actual repairman to fix the machines one day after the rent was handed over. Some people just need to learn the hard way, don't they, guys? Like, what a beautiful malicious compliance, and OP's husband is very, very lucky to have her. Quite a few years ago, I became a student in some 85,000 people town, and having a bit of money on the side from late grandpa, I decided that I would find myself a one-bedroom apartment instead of a campus, where I would probably be drinking and doing stupid stuff. I found a fairly cheap place to rent, just at the outskirts of town, not in the best condition, but who cares, it's a living. The landlord seemed okay. He was in his late 40s or 50s, and we signed a contract and it was all done. Now, before I start writing further, I always paid rent on time and there was no issue with that or noise from me or anything of such kind. Now, once I moved in though, I noticed the flat was a mess. Everything was waiting to collapse, from old wooden chairs with broken legs, mold on the shower curtains, semi-broken window frames, and a mattress you wouldn't want to lay on because you may get a spring in the pooper accident. The guy cleverly managed to hide it all, and I missed all of it. But never mind, me being a bit handy with everything, I decided to fix most of it myself. So I bought bleach for the toxic sludge in the bathroom, some wood glue for the chairs, tile glue for the floor, etc., getting everything fixed up. So the landlord comes in for the rent next month and sees everything I've done. The guy was really angry, and I mean really angry. He then shouts at me saying, if you have a problem, you call me. Don't fix it yourself, you stupid village idiot. Now, village idiot is maybe the nicest translation, given that he insulted me based on me coming from a 500 people village. And I'm thinking, if you want to play that way, fine by me. Now, I'm not an aggressive or confrontational guy, but I will hold a grudge, and I'm smart enough to make a bit of a ruckus. So I decide to take it literally, and I call him for every little flea-sized problem I can find. So a plan was made. I took pictures and documented everything, from bigger issues to smallest, and I looked up his schedule and crossed it with mine, so I knew when to call for repairs. Now, under contract, he wasn't allowed in unless I gave him permission to be there with me. So I decided that I would make him do repairs while I'm sitting there. Now, you may be asking, how did I ensure he would fix everything? Easy. I would back up all the pictures with damages and say it'll end up on social media. Or thanks to my buddies at college, ensure his name would come out in a mandatory information email for new students at the beginning of the school year. So everyone would avoid him in the future. And that worked, to my surprise. And that's when hell started for him. The guy wasn't used to manual labor, but he was too cheap to pay someone to do it for him. He didn't know how to screw in a light bulb, let alone fix a kitchen table or a windowsill. I regularly called him to reschedule to most idiotic times, like 6 a.m. or 11 p.m. Sometimes even letting him start driving his car to my place, only to call him back saying I'm unavailable. I was a monster, sending him requests to repair the smallest things all the time and annoying him all the time. Until 2 months in, when I realized that he was tired of it. It turns out that he started smoking again due to the stress of me being so demanding, and the guy couldn't get sleep for days at a time because of me. Finally, when he went to unscrew the drain pipe in the mini kitchen, I asked him, hey, do you want me to take care of it? He then looked at me and apologized for being a dick. Finally, the flat was fairly okay to live in, and after the contract ended, I signed up for the campus room. Honestly, when Opie said that he was a monster, I have to disagree. Like, the guy brought this upon himself. Like, how can you be a landlord and get mad at a tenant for trying to make the place they're living in a little bit better? Like, what kind of backwards landlord is that? You're not allowed to fix broken chair legs in my house or glue broken tiles down. I will do it for you. Alright, sir, now you get many sleepless nights and you get to start up an expensive habit again. And that, my friends, brings us to another end of our /malicious compliance on these crazy landlords. Guys, I hope you enjoyed the stories today. If you did, hit that thumbs up, and if you missed the last episode of the channel, I'll link it right here. It's an r/entitled people episode, your favorite, where entitled Karens refuse to work, and when they're forced to work, they want to sue the company. It's such a funny story, so go check it out if you haven't, and myself and Stevie Boy will see you guys in the next one. We love you.